What if the biggest threat to America wasn't an army but an alliance targeting its single greatest power, the US dollar? Because right now, a coalition of nations called BRICS, home to most of the planet's population, isn't just talking about it. They are making a calculated play to dismantle that power. They aren't just talking, they are building a new system, piece by piece. This is the story of how a global rebellion against the US dollar began and why the countdown to a new world order may have already started. Hi everyone, this is George, and today let's explore an interesting turn in the economic history of our planet. Alright, to understand what's happening right now, we need to rewind the clock a little bit. How did one currency get this much power anyway? The story begins in 1944, in the ruins of World War II. Leaders from 44 nations met at the Bretton Woods at New Hampshire to create a stable economic system. Their solution? A plan as simple as it was brilliant. Every other major currency would be tied to the US dollar, and the dollar itself would be tied to gold at $35 an ounce. Well, that was brilliant, of course, for the US. Since the US held most of the world's gold, it was the only country that could make that promise. Overnight, the dollar was crowned the world's reserve currency, meaning that central banks everywhere started holding onto it as a stable asset. Suddenly, all international trade and global loans began flowing in US dollars. But that golden promise had an expiration date. By the early 70s, huge spending on the Vietnam War and at home put a massive strain on the US economy. Other countries got nervous and started asking for their gold back. So, in a shock move, in 1971, President Nixon severed the dollar's linked gold. It looked like the end of the dollar, but in a stunning geopolitical pivot, the dollar found a new anchor. The US deepened its economic and military ties with key oil-producing nations, leading to an informal arrangement where oil, the world's most vital commodity, was priced and sold in US dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar. From that moment on, any country that needed to buy oil first had to buy dollars. And just like that, the golden cage was replaced by an oil-powered one, locking in the dollar's top spot. This system gave the United States what a French official once called an exorbitant privilege. Think about it. America could essentially print money to pay its bills without the same consequences other countries would face. But with great power comes a great temptation. The temptation to turn that tool into a weapon. Because most large international payments have to pass through the US banks, the American government could suddenly see, freeze, and even seize money. This power is called sanctions, and for decades countries like Iran and North Korea have felt the squeeze of being locked out of the dollar system. But then came the moment that changed everything. The real catalyst, the event that truly galvanized the global rebellion, came in 2022. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the US and its allies froze hundreds of billions of Russia's central bank reserves and kicked major Russian banks off of SWIFT. Now, SWIFT isn't a bank. It's the secure messaging system that nearly all international banks use to communicate between each other. Getting kicked off is economic exile. The move was aimed at Moscow, but shockwave was felt across the globe. It sent a chilling message to capitals from Beijing to Brasilia. If this could happen to a major power, it could happen to anyone. The dollar suddenly looked less like a tool for business and more like an instrument of coercion. This is where the BRICS comes in. The group, originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was formed in 2009, founded on the idea that Western powers had too much control. For years, it was more of a discussion forum, but seeing the dollar weaponized against one of its own members lit a fire under the alliance. So BRICS went on the offensive side. And it got bigger, a lot bigger. In a historic expansion, the alliance swelled to 10 full members: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia joined the original 5. A new partner country category was also created, bringing nations like Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Uganda, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam into the group's orbit. Let's pause here for a second and truly grasp the scale of this. The expanded BRICS now represents over 4.4 billion people. That's 55% of the world. Their combined share of the global economy has hit nearly 44% when measured in purchasing power parity. This is no longer a talking shop for emerging economies. It is a heavyweight coalition that represents the global majority. And their strategy is brilliantly simple. They aren't trying to kill the dollar in one fell swoop. Instead, their plan is far more subtle, to make it slowly but surely irrelevant. The most direct attack is on trade. Look at Russia and China. In 2015, roughly 90% of their trade was in US dollars. By 2024, reports indicated over 90% was done on Russian rubles and Chinese yuans. This is the model they are replicating. India now buys oil from the UAE in rupees, and China and Brazil trade directly in their own currencies. But to truly escape the dollar orbit, trading in local currencies isn't enough. You need to build an entirely new system, a parallel financial universe if you wanted so. And that is exactly what they are doing. The foundations is the New Development Bank, the NDB, a direct alternative to the World Bank and the IMF. Headquartered in Shanghai, its job is to fund infrastructure projects, and crucially, it's making a point to lend more in local currencies instead of dollars. But the most ambitious project is the plan for an alternative to SWIFT. Often called BRICS Bridge, think of it as a financial superhighway connecting the payment systems of member nations directly, with no off-ramps to New York or London. This would make them virtually immune to the kind of sanctions that hit Russia. To top it off, they have their own financial safety net, the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, the CRA. With a 100 billion pool of funds, the CRA allows member countries to lend to each other during a crisis, reducing their reliance on emergency loans from the IMF. From new trade patterns to new financial plumbing, BRICS is building a self-contained ecosystem where the dollar is no longer the gatekeeper. You might be wondering, how is the empire striking back? The response has been complicated and some argue has only added fuel to the fire. Threats of aggressive economic pushback, particularly through tariffs, have become a major part of the conversation. President Trump has publicly floated ideas like a blanket 10% tariff on all imports and even tougher penalties for nations seen as undermining the dollar. On paper, this sounds powerful, but here is the dangerous paradox. An analysis from the respected Peterson Institute for International Economics suggested that such broad tariffs would likely shrink the US economy and cause a major spike in prices for American consumers. It would undoubtedly hurt the BRICS nations, but it would also hit American businesses and families hard. And in a stunning twist of irony, these aggressive threats aren't scaring countries back into line. They are doing the exact opposite. Instead of deterring them, the rhetoric is seen as more proof of why they need to de-dollarize even faster. It feeds their narrative that the US uses economic bullying to stay on top. When Brazil's president was asked about these kind of threats, he was defiant, stating that BRICS is determined to end dollar dominance no matter what. The threats aren't a deterrent, they are a rallying cry. Now, before we declare the dollar dead, let's be clear. This path for BRICS is full of landmines. The bloc is a mix of democracies and autocracies, and their interests don't always align. Historic rivalries, especially the strategic competition between India and China, remain a major hurdle. The complexity of this rapid expansion also presents challenges, with key invited nations like Saudi Arabia still not having formally confirmed their membership, highlighting the diplomatic tightrope the alliance must walk. Then there is the elephant in the room, and this is China. Is this truly a partnership of equals, or could it become a new system dominated by the yuan instead of the dollar? Countries like India worry the alliance might become a tool for Chinese dominance. Plus, several members are battling their own economic instability, which could weaken the entire group. And let's be honest here, the US dollar is incredibly powerful. It's still used in the vast majority of global trade and held in reserve by nearly every central bank. Dismantling a system that's been the default for almost a century now is a massive undertaking that will take many years, if not decades. And the ultimate goal, a single shared BRICS currency, remains for now a distant dream. But even with all those obstacles, you can't deny the direction things are heading. The era where the United States was the world's undisputed economic king is fading. The decision to use finance as a weapon has backfired, sparking the creation of a powerful coalition, tired of playing by America's rules. The expansion of BRICS has given it the sheer size to build a real alternative. The pieces are being put in place. Trade in their own currencies, a development bank outside of Western control, and payment system to get around SWIFT. Every move chips away at the dollar's foundation. No, the world isn't going to stop using the dollar overnight, but what we are seeing is the very beginning of a deep structural shift to a world with multiple powers. So, what do you think? Is the BRICS alliance a real threat to the US dollar? Or are its own internal problems too big to overcome? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The history of the dollar's reign and the rapid rise of BRICS is more than just a headline. It's a lesson in power and economics. But what would a unified BRICS currency actually look like? Could it succeed? To do these topics justice, I am breaking them down. Instead of having this video a 2-hour-long lecture, my next Economics Thursdays videos will take a deep dive into the dollar's history, the BRICS ascent, and the controversial idea of a common currency. So stay tuned for all of them. See you in the next time. Bye bye.